Hello everyone. So welcome to this series of Alteryx Designer. So in this lesson, I was talking about Alteryx Designer user interface. So in this topic, we are specifically looking at the configuration window of Alteryx Designer tool. So what are the various configuration options in Alteryx Designer? So let's see that. We have three main configuration options for Alteryx Designer tool. So first is workflow configuration. So whenever we create a new workflow, when I'm hitting on this plus tab, it creates the new workflow. And in this workflow, you can see this is the workflow configuration. And this is the configuration tab under which these are the workflow configuration. So next we have tool configuration. So if I drag any of these tools and if I select that particular tool, and it will show me the configuration options for the tool. So next we have connection configuration. So let's look at each of these configuration windows. So first, let's start with the workflow configuration. So under workflow configuration, we have 6 types of configuration settings. So one is canvas. So whenever we create a new workflow, it uh, gives us these configuration options. So it asks us about the layout direction of our canvas. So what direction do we want to have? Is it horizontal or is it vertical? So we can decide on the layout direction of the canvas. So it also shows the annotation, whether do we want to hide or show the annotations of the configuration of the workflow. See, here it shows the annotation within the workflow. So if I click hide, it will hide my configuration. So if I click show, it will show my configuration, but it will not um, uh, what we say, it will not display here. So likewise, I may have various tools. So it will we have the options to hide or show our annotations. So in the same way, let's say I have a data pipeline, and when I hit run, it flows through input, through transformations, and through data blending, and finally to the output. So let's say if you want to see the progress of our connection, we can use this option, show only when running, or show it or hide. We can use these canvas options. So next we have workflow configuration within the new workflow. So under this, if we have opened our workflow, it will show the path where the workflow is located, and it will show us the type of our workflow. So there are 3 types of workflows. One is a standard workflow which has YXMD extension. Another is analytic app, so which has different extension, and another is macro, which will also have a different extension. Now there are some constants that is already set, like where should be what is the version, and what is the temp file path, and what is the workflow directory path, what is the workflow file name. So all these things are set up here. So based on there are some changes in the workflow, these like workflow name, if I save this workflow, the workflow name will change here. So these are workflow configuration in the workflow configuration window. Next, we have runtime tab, where we can see the memory limit. So by default, it uses the global default limit. So if you want to set use specific amount, we can set that, but it's not recommended. So it's recommended to use the default global limit to run a workflow. So we can also say specify where do we want to save our temporary files. So by default it uses the global default location, which is app data local temp. But if you want to specify other location, we can do that. So next we have conversion errors option. So in this we can limit the number of conversion errors that we want to display in our workflow. Also, we can select this option, stop processing when limit is reached. So let's say I have more than 10 conversion errors in my workflow, then I can say stop processing my workflow. Then my workflow will not proceed further if we reach this limit. Next, we have record limit for all inputs. So let's say I have a lot of inputs in my workflow, multiple inputs. So let's say I want to limit the input records, number of records. So I can say, let's say 1,000 of something else. So right now there is no limit set. It's a default a record limit, whatever we have from the source, all the data is being used. So we have other options as well. So let's see in detail what is the use of all these options. So let me go to the Alteryx documentation. So the other options were cancel running workflow and error. So let's say if you want to cancel a workflow when an error occurred, then we can select this option. And another option is disable all browse tools. So what is the use of this? So disabling the browse tool enhances the performance of our Alteryx workflow. So let's see here, select to disable all browse tools in a workflow as well as results window data for all tools. This optimizes workflow processing. Disabled tool appear dimmed on canvas. So this is the use of disabling the browse tools. Next, we have show all macro messages. So if we want, we can select this option. So it will report all the macro messages if we have created a macro workflow. Now, we can also disable all tools that write outputs. By selecting this option, you are disabling all tools that write an output except for in-database processing, because this output happens in the database side. So when we select disable all output tools that write output, it will disable the output tools within Alteryx, and also the macros that generate outputs are disabled. So we need to use this option when we want to troubleshoot our workflow without having to generate the output. So in this case, we can use this. So there is another option called enable performance profiling. Use this option only when we have to improve the performance of a workflow. Otherwise, if you keep on checking this option for every workflow, it will hit the performance on your workflow because it generates a lot of metadata of the workflow every time the workflow is ran. So you can enable this performance profiling whenever you want to improve the performance of a particular workflow, then disable it and then do whatever changes that you need to do based on the performance suggestions. So if you want to run your workflow in Alteryx multi-threaded processing AMP, the new architecture, then you can use this option. You can check this option, use AMP engine. So that will use the new Alteryx engine created for Alteryx. So what do we have next? So next we have events tab in workflow configuration. So you can enable or disable the events tab. So if we enable the events tab, go to add, say run command, and inside the event, edit event, you see there are various options. So this will allow you to decide what to run. So if you want to run something before the workflow has run, then you can type the command what it needs to run before the workflow even started. So it will run the command before the workflow, and even you can write something that you want to execute after your workflow has run. So you can execute some commands after your workflow. You can execute some commands after run with errors. So if there are run with errors, you can execute that commands and run without errors. And disable, if the run event is disabled, then you can execute some command, it will run based on the option. Next, we have meta info our workflow. So this meta info describes the details of our workflow. So let's say if you want to tag a lot of information to your workflow, so who is like what is the file name? So if you want to define a custom file name, you can define it here, the custom workflow file name. Then if you want to write some description about the details of the workflow, you can write it here. And if you want to attribute some URL, like who is the owner, or uh, what URL the users need to go if they want to ask any questions about this workflow, you can add a URL here as well. So if there are some tool in database, um, if you select custom option and no if you want to set author name or company name or copyright information, you can do that here. So even you can set some search tags and you know the category name inside a tool palette. So I think for that you to select a particular tool, or you need to have the workflow setup. So right now my workflow is not saved, so those options are not yet visible. So once I save my workflow, these options will be visible to me. So let's see, this is one of our existing workflow, and I have went into the meta info. See, we have given this workflow a custom name, combine two spreadsheets containing customer data, and we have written some description, and then we have given the search tags to this workflow, and like who's the author name, the company name, the copyright information. Okay. We have one more option called XML View. This will be hidden by default. So we can go to options and user settings and edit user settings. Under advanced, I can select text display XML in properties window and click save. So when I hit save, if you just refresh this, yeah, so my XML view will be displayed. So this is the XML view of our Alteryx workflow. So by default, this will be hidden, but by using the user settings options, we can display this XML view as well. So this was in brief about workflow configuration. So let's move on to the tool configuration under configuration window. So there are 4 types of configuration settings under tool configuration. So when I select a tool, we have configuration, we have so right now I've selected XML view, so XML view is being displayed. So we have navigation, we have annotation, and we have a help. So if you want to see some help, we can see the help of particular tool in the Alteryx document. So let's see in detail about the configuration. So in the under configuration, we have since I have an input data tool, so it's asking me to connect to a file or database. So let me go to this option and say select this file. I have connected, selected this file. Okay, I think there's no file here, so let me go and select another file here that is saved. Okay, so I have selected one of the files, it's connected. So now notice this error goes away. So we had error previously. So again, we have some errors that says you can't find the path, you can't find the file. Let me run it and see. Yeah, it still can't find the path. So don't worry about this now. We can connect to a different file, but just I'm showing you how these configuration options are being shown here. So once you connect to a file, it shows the record limit that you want to pull, the file format. Right now, there are various formats that you can select: CSV, HDFS, JSON, so on and so forth. Now, if you want to search a particular file in subdirectory, let's say you are not connecting to a specific file, you are connecting to a directory, but in that directory, you want to search a file based on certain name, you can check this option and the Alteryx workflow will search the file in the directory. So in the fourth option, you have output file name as field. So if you have multiple fields in your input data and you want to output your file name based on a particular name, let's say for example employee data, in that I have an employee name, so I want to output the data based on an employee name, I can use this option. Yeah, file name, output file name as file name only or full path or no. So if we have a CSV, then we may have some delimiters in CSV. It could be comma, it could be pipe, and something else. So if I select Excel, I'll get another option. So where is the Excel? Yeah, here we have. So if I select Excel, I have altogether different options. So based on the options that you select, your configurations will change. Now next, I have a navigation. So let's say I've added another tool uh, into my canvas. So it has created a connection. So now it asks me to which folder do I want to write to. I can select a folder name to which I want to write to. But there is a connection that happened between input data. So here I can see the navigation. So what is the navigation? From input data, it's going to the output data. So there is another option called wireless. So if I check this option wireless, it happens without, yeah. When we select wireless, the connection between two of the tools will be invisible. So just the wireless symbol is displayed here. Okay, so uncheck this wireless box. Next, we have annotation. So if you want to write some annotation, so let's say here it just says input data. So instead of input data, I want to write Salesforce. So I can clearly mention, so okay, from where I am inputting the data. So this is the use of annotations. So whenever you drag some tools into the canvas, based on the uh, order that you drag in, it will keep on creating an ID for each of the tools. So let me select this tool. It has given it an ID 23. If you drag any other tool, it will give an ID as 24. So based on the order that we drag the tool into the canvas, the Alteryx will keep on giving it the IDs. Okay, so next we have help. So in the help tool, generally, like, it will take you to the Alteryx documentation where you can see details about this Alteryx tool configuration. So in the XML view, you can see the details of these configuration in XML. Okay. So what do we have next? So we have connection configuration next. So what are the things in connection configuration? We have connection name, wireless, and fields. So what is connection configuration? So let's see, we have these two input and output tools, and what is there between these two tools is a connection. So under connection, we have three configuration. One is connection name, Salesforce. I can write the name of the connection, Salesforce to Oracle DW. So I'm transferring the data from Salesforce to Oracle DW. I'm giving a name to my connection. So I can little bit drag this so that these details will be visible to me. So I have given a connection name. So if I select this again, so I can select whether this connection is wireless or wired. So if I select wireless, then the line between these two tools will not be visible, but they are connected. So let's get here and let's select this and uncheck the wireless. So what do we have next? Next, we have fields under the connection name. So what are the fields that we want to connect? We can even describe them. So let me open an existing workflow to show you what are the details that we'll have in the connection configuration. So I have selected this connection. So under this connection, you can see there is no name of this connection, but there are various fields that says how the data is being flown. So you can see that here. Let me expand this a little bit more. So all these records, all these field names that you see here, it says what is being flown in between. So it says from select tool to join tool, what are the records that are flowing to join tool from the select tool. So there are 9 records that are flowing into the join tool on the left side. So what are their names? What are their types? What are their sizes? What are their sources? So similarly, if you select the another connection, it says there are only 4 records that are being flowing from the second input data to the join tool, and what are the types and sizes and what is the source. So this was in brief about the connection configuration. So to summarize, we have looked at workflow configuration, we have looked at the another configuration which is called let me, a tool configuration, and we have also looked at the connection configuration. So that's all for today. If you like my content, please like and subscribe, and stay tuned, stay updated for more videos. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you.